Hello, my name is Joseph Barrow, and I'm presenting an analysis of Winston Churchill's leadership traits during World War II. First, we'll start with an overview of Northhouse's traits approach. Northouse believes that leadership is rooted in personal traits and that traits differentiate leaders from non leaders. He has a deep focus on intrinsic characteristics. Now, let me be more clear. What Northouse does is he kind of synthesizes and distills all the different research on leadership traits and distills it down to these five major leadership traits: intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. Now, in order to analyze, conduct a trait leadership analysis of Churchill, we kind of have to understand the context and his background. So he was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945. He assumed his leadership role as Prime Minister during the Nazi advance in Europe. This was an absolute dire times, and Britain, the UK, faced extinction. He faced, as Prime Minister, he faced military setbacks, incredible, tremendous economic strain on the British Empire, and the Nazi Germany's were an existential threat to the survival of the United Kingdom. Now, Churchill's leadership traits, incredible intelligence, both your traditional intelligence and your emotional intelligence. He had it all. He was a brilliant strategist, and he was an exceptional communicator. He had tremendous self-confidence, which instilled unflappable confidence in the British people. He had determination. He refused to accept defeat no matter what. He refused it. There would be no capitulation. There would be no surrender. Integrity, he led by example. Sociability, probably one of his strongest suits. He had an incredible ability to interact with the parliament, the royal family, the military, the allies, and the general public. He was a master politician for wartime. And that's key, understanding this for wartime. All right, now there's some limitations in using this approach to examine Churchill, and it becomes pretty evident. The historical timing. This was leadership in crisis. Now, this leadership may have been effective in crisis. Would it have been effective outside of crisis? Well, we're going to discuss that in a second. It was not. UK experienced severe post-war struggles going into 1945. Their economy was devastated. They were isolated. There was tremendous upheaval in the British economy and as far as labor, unions, all of that. And that same inspirational, keep a stiff upper lip style that Churchill had was not suited to wartime. The general public did not want to hear that. The war was over. They expected the hardships to end, and they expected there to be a recovery. And his party kind of took the fall for that. Now, another thing, another part of this limitation of trait approach is that it's centered on the individual leader. It doesn't account for followership. It doesn't account for the British public, their tenacity, their ability to endure extreme hardships, their loyalty, what makes them British. It just doesn't account for alliances, the other leaders that were helping Churchill. It doesn't account for the existing institutions within the UK, such as their incredible military and their incredible civic institutions. It doesn't take any of this into account, the external factors that made him successful. So just as it doesn't take into account historical timing, the events, it also doesn't take into account things that kind of supercharged his leadership during the war. So, in summary, Churchill, yes, he's a great example of someone who illustrates this trait-based leadership. And trait theory can be used to explain his and examine his leadership style, as we have done. However, again, the trait theory fails to explain It doesn't explain why he succeeded when he did, because it doesn't really take into account all the varying external factors that the networked factors, the multi-level factors that made him a success. It just kind of looks at him and assumes that he was a successful leader because of his intrinsic qualities, which there's far more to the story than just Churchill. And in this picture right here on the bottom, I put that in there because that's the British, that's the royal family. Yes, he had the ability to, his sociability, he was able to kind of leverage them and work with them to rally the British people, but, they are part of the story as well. It's not all Churchill, as I said before. And here we have the references for this. I just pulled straight from the 10th edition of Northhouse's Leadership Theory and Practice. And that concludes my presentation.